Hello and welcome to Adminchat. I'm Shelagh Donnelly and I'm coming to you from my home office in Vancouver, Canada. We are going to look today at public speaking, your voice and your career. When I talk about public speaking, what are the first impressions that come to your mind? Do you think of yourself being front and center in front of a crowd, on stage as it were, with the bright lights shining down on you? That may well be the case, and you're likely to be the center of attention while you deliver a report, an update, or some information and inspiration to an audience. However, your public speaking skills impact how people perceive you in day-to-day situations. So I would like to encourage you to take everything we're looking at today, the skills, the strategies for public speaking, and consider how you can apply them, not only if you're asked to give a presentation, or teach or inform someone on a new topic in the office or in your professional network or association, but think about how you can apply these same skills on a day-to-day basis. They're particularly handy when it comes to interview situations. The same preparations techniques, the same speaking strategies that serve you well in front of a crowd of 5, 10, 500 people will do you well in an interview situation also. And your ability to speak clearly and concisely can impact your ability to influence decision making. We all know that assistants typically exercise influence more than authority. And so it's important for you to capitalize on your ability to influence, not manipulate, but influence outcomes and decisions, whether you want to advocate for professional development, for some changes in the office, for an SOP or something new. Your ability to present yourself clearly and concisely makes a difference. Here's a look at our agenda for this afternoon. This afternoon, Vancouver time. It may be evening where you are. Wherever you are, whenever you're watching this, we're going to start with public speaking as an opportunity. We're going to focus on how we view public speaking. Then we'll look at flipping your perspective, preparing your presentation, proactive strategies you can take to ensure you give the best possible presentation, and then presentation time itself. As you're getting settled in, I would suggest that if you would like to get a pen and paper, have them handy, put me on pause anytime you like throughout the webinar. Do that now if you like to get something to write on, a tablet, an iPad, or paper. And remembering that this is professional development, because that's what Adminchat is, I would suggest pause anytime, make notes, and identify takeaways that will help you. You may be already quite comfortable with public speaking and looking at ideas on, how do other people approach it? How can I hone my skills, refine them even further? Or you may be like a number of people I know who are quite accomplished. Face it, many assistants serve as the right hand of their executives. You're knowledgeable, you're informed, but I know and I understand how many of you are uncomfortable with the notion of speaking to an audience at large. So here we go. The first thing I would suggest to you is to remember that public speaking represents an opportunity. If you have been sitting in the audience watching other people present, think about how you might take advantage of opportunities or create your own opportunities for public speaking. What's interesting about this is that despite public speaking representing opportunity, even these accomplished people that we all know shy away from taking such opportunities. Why is that? For some, public speaking is downright terrifying. Now, I love a good roller coaster ride, and I also happen to enjoy public speaking. I've been doing it since I was 13 years old. And I know that that's not the case for everyone. Some people are frightened of it. Others are concerned they might lose their composure, or in this case, something else. And it's not comfortable to lose control in front of a crowd, is it? That brings us to the fact that some people are simply critical of ourselves. We may wish we looked or sounded a little different, or we may criticize and have an inner voice telling us, you don't look good enough, you don't sound professional enough or informed enough. Well, you know what? You're going to sound the same way when you're speaking with someone one-on-one, and people are quite accepting of you in that environment, aren't they? You look the way you look, you sound the way you sound, and people generally for the most part, want people to succeed when they're public speaking. So keep that in mind. All of these issues come to making ourselves vulnerable, don't we? When you are standing in front of a group, when I'm here in front of the computer talking to you and talking with you, I'm making myself vulnerable. And that's something that sometimes we're uncomfortable with. People could be nervous about crashing, not literally, but crashing, bombing, failing in front of an audience, whether it's an audience of 5, 10, 50, or 100. And that's human nature. Some people do prefer a low profile, do not want attention, thank you. I know many people like this who would simply be happy doing what they do so well, but being one of the crowd. Is that you? Or do you simply find public speaking a bit of an uphill climb and rather daunting? I'm going to ask you to pause me in a second and reflect. Now, if you're someone who enjoys public speaking, include this in your thoughts. But particularly if you're someone who does not find public speaking something that comes naturally or something you love, pause me and think, take a couple of notes. Where do you shine? Reflect on what you do well. I'll be right back here when you take me off pause. And now that you've looked at areas in which you shine and do really well, ask yourself, from a career perspective, are you being recognized for those qualities? Or would you like greater recognition of those contributions you make? That recognition can translate to greater compensation or opportunities. Bottom line is you can create greater opportunities for career growth through putting yourself forward. When you raise your hand, what you're really doing is raising your profile and potentially that influence you carry. If you avoid speaking opportunities, take a minute, pause me again, and write down a couple of notes. Why do you do so? What is the worst thing that could happen to you if you either accepted or created an opportunity to present in front of a group? You may stumble, you may trip a bit, but you usually get up, don't you? It's unlikely that you will face extinction. That is not an option. You will carry on. You may feel uncomfortable for a bit, but you will move forward. Get ready to pause this screen again and think about the worst thing that has ever happened to you as a result of you public speaking. If you haven't done public speaking yet, think about when you presented in front of a team meeting. View it that way. I would like you to pause me here and write down the very worst thing that's ever happened to you as a result of public speaking. And I can bet it won't be this. As we identify the reasons that we may hold back or refrain from opportunities to speak in front of a group, I would encourage you to flip the perspective and think about the best possible outcome you could achieve if you do begin capitalizing on such opportunities. What's the best outcome you could hope for if you elevated your profile just a little bit even, whether it's within a professional association, in your office, or another environment? And that takes us to flipping your perspective on public speaking. I would like you to think about the last time you stood up at a conference to ask a question, or you took the floor to deliver a report or an update to a meeting, or brought information to an audience. As you were getting out of your chair and preparing to speak to people, what kind of thoughts were going through your head? Pause me here, think back to the last time you spoke for an audience and what was going through your mind. Do any of these resonate? Asking yourself, do I look all right? Will I sound okay? I'm not sure if people will pay attention to me. Or the converse, I don't want all this attention. I know my stuff, but I don't really want to have people looking at me and listening to me speak in front of them. Sometimes self-doubts creep in terms of our knowledge base. Could someone else be better informed? Or would someone else express this better than me? If any of those go through your mind as you're preparing to speak, understand, first of all, that that's natural, it's not unusual. But what you can do is flip the way you think. Instead of preparing to speak and getting up thinking, what will people think of me? Turn your attention to the audience, to the people sitting in those chairs. What makes you want to put yourself in a chair and listen to someone? Pull up a chair and think of a speaker whom you admire. What are the qualities you value in those speakers? Again, take a minute if you like, put me on pause. Think of the last conference you attended, or a speaker you particularly enjoy hearing when you go to conferences, someone whose name, when you see it on the program, you say, aha, I've got to make sure I listen to so-and-so because, and then write down why. What are those qualities? What is it about that speaker that you value or admire that makes you invest your time and sometimes your financial resources in listening to them? Here's a thought for you. Drawing is speaking to the eye. Talking is painting to the ear. And of course, when we are speaking to an audience, it may be a business presentation, it may be something entirely different. So of course you want to paint to the ear, but you also want to appeal to their logic and to their interests and passions. When I think of speakers I particularly admire, these four are among the tops of them. The best speakers really are in leagues of their own. You may or may not recognize some of these names. David Chilton is a Canadian economist and author. He wrote The Wealthy Barber when he was a very young person. He re-released it. He's influenced a lot of people. I've heard him speak at a conference, and what rang true for me, or what resonated with me, was how relatable David Chilton was. Highly intelligent man, an economist, very, very well versed in finance, but he had the integrity of knowing his stuff. He was passionate about encouraging people to be fiscally responsible. And while that may sound like a dry topic, he is the most entertaining, engaging speaker you could ever want to hear. I highly recommend him. The same is true with these other speakers, Bill Clinton, Vicente Fox, and Wade Davis, who you may or may not be familiar with, but if you're all interested in the natural environment, he is a National Geographic explorer in residence. And if you want to consider people who speak with passion, that is someone who is very, very engaging. The thing about good speakers is that you can respect them whether or not you agree with their political beliefs. I've included 2 politicians on this list, and you do not need to be aligned with all of an audience's views in order to inspire or engage them. What you need to do is understand what they're here for, why they've come to listen to you, and then deliver. These are some of the things the best speakers bring to a room. Integrity. Now, I'm not going to touch on integrity in politicians at all. When I'm referring to integrity, I am speaking about knowledge base, that they understand what they're talking about, that they know the subject matter, that you can relate to them because you have that degree, because they have that integrity. The best speakers are knowledgeable. They know what they're talking about. They have done their homework or they've lived it. They also have compassion. Compassion for their audience, and compassion for the subject about which they're speaking, if it's a human topic. So if you look at speakers and you think of those who are good, you'll know that they don't all speak in monotones. People will demonstrate their passion, and that's more so when you are engaged in something that's inspirational rather than business. But if you think about the best business leaders, they're passionate about the products, about the company, the organization, the vision, the values, the strategic plan. And that's what helps you engage, that the people transmit their passion for a specific topic. People who are good speakers have insight on their topic and on their audience. It's quite typical, if you have gone back over your notes or if you go over them later and you think about, what is it I liked about that speaker? Stories may not have sprung to mind, but stories are often part of what engage people in the topic. You can give the information, the facts and figures, but the story is something that people can relate to, and that makes them pay even closer attention to what you're discussing. Imagery is important, whether it's the words where you're painting to the ear or photos or drawings in your presentations. One of the bottom line criteria for me in a good speaker is respect. That the speaker demonstrates respect, number one, for the audience's intelligence, and number two, for the audience's time. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But here are some qualities and strategies that the best speakers do deploy. Body language that's open and engaging. Energy. You don't want to sit and listen to someone who speaks in a monotone or looks flat and unengaged. You want someone who makes eye contact, someone who modulates their voice, will raise it, will lower it, and pace their wording, pace their presentation, and introduce nuances so that you're not speaking all at an extremely fast pace or at a monotone. I have a couple of thoughts here. These are not mine, but a couple of thoughts I'd like you to consider. One person famously said, public speaking is very easy. Another person on the topic of impromptu speeches said, it usually takes more than 3 weeks to prepare a good one. Now, I don't know about you, but this first quote came from Dan Quayle, who famously or infamously made a few faux pas with his public speaking. He was a vice president of the United States. Another American, Mark Twain, is the person who came up with this one. And if you have ever invested time in giving a good presentation, you know it does take time and work. In fact, if you think about the work that assistants do, it's both a blessing and a curse, isn't it? You work so effectively that you make the things that are almost impossible look easy and effortless. You've seen it, I'm sure, where people say, oh, so-and-so can do that in their sleep. Well, you can do it, but it's because you have practiced, you have built up your skill inventory, and you work diligently to make it happen and to appear effortless. The same is true with public speaking. There's work involved. There usually is with anything worthwhile. It's not magic. It is a combination of skill, and some people will already have skills. Some of you may enjoy public speaking and you're just looking to retool, refine your skills. With others, you may want to be building your skills. You do have them. It's just a matter of working on them and being disciplined about it. So as we look at how to present effectively, let's go back. Here are some steps. Start with identifying speakers you admire. And again, remember, just pause this anytime to make notes that will help you after, because this is your professional development, this Adminchat webinar, and I'd like you to get as much as possible from it. So, what are the strategies you see the speakers you admire deploy? What is it about them that makes you want to listen? You've got that in mind now. We know that public speaking represents opportunity. We're going to flip our perspective to dwell on the audience's needs rather than what is the audience thinking of me. And now we'll look at some steps involved in preparing that presentation. Robert Frost said, half the world is composed of people who have something to say and can't. And the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. I would suggest that you do not want to be in either of those camps. If you are, you want to refine what you're doing. Now, when we speak of refining, and I'm holding up some pretty high standards here, and I'm encouraging you to hold up some high standards when you start identifying speakers whom you admire and value. The trick is, you do not want to make a mistake of holding yourself to the same standards right away that it's taken these people years to achieve. No matter how talented a speaker, no matter how good an orator, what a great storyteller someone is, those skills may be there, they may be inherent, but people work to refine them. So do not expect that you have to be as shining in your presentations initially, or even after a few practice runs, as other people. Make and create your own standards. Bottom line, do not be intimidated by what other people do. whether it's a famous or infamous speaker or someone else in your office or professional network. Hold yourself to your own standards. Make them high, though. Study those speakers you admire. Watch and listen. You may want to listen to audio clips of speakers and ask yourself, what did they do well? What can I pick up from this? You always want to, when you incorporate other people's strategies and techniques, make them your own. Do not blindly adopt, and I know you wouldn't, don't blindly adopt someone else's approach just because it works for them. That's authentic to that person. You need to, again, have your own standards, but incorporate ideas you can pick up from others. If you're at a conference, or if you're watching a video of someone presenting, you might want sometimes to just turn the audio off and pay attention to the body language. What kind of signals, what kind of engagement is the speaker signaling? And then practice. And if you do this, you will be preparing yourself to speak with sang-froid. Sang-froid is freedom of agitation or excitement of mind. It implies coolness in trying circumstances and a sense of calm in danger or difficult situations. Now, you're not going to be in danger when you're public speaking. You're not going to be in danger giving a project update. Think of it instead as being like a tall glass of cool water, refreshing, inspiring. Sang-froid does not mean you're devoid of animation or emotion when you're presenting. It does mean that you're able to deliver with composure and without agitation because you have done your homework and you are prepared. Another step in being prepared is knowing your audience. Check the composition. If you don't know, ask questions. Now, you don't necessarily need to know the individual's names, but it helps to know what their background, what their role is, what they're coming to, why they're coming to this presentation. What are their expectations? Are you and your audience on the same page in terms of what you're going to deliver? That's huge. You also want to pre-qualify your audience. Now, if this is an office situation, you'll know much of this already. But if you're taking the leap and speaking in front of an audience outside your office environment, check, what do people already know about this topic? You will have instances where you'll have some people who are highly informed, and you want to be sure that you inspire those people and give them relevant information. At the same time, you want to be thoughtful that there may be people who are novice to this topic on which you're speaking, and so you need to strike a balance between inspiring and keeping the attention of the people who know the topic without going over the heads of the people who are there because they need to learn, want to learn what you're talking about. And you need to know your topic. You'd better know it yourself. You may already have a head start. If you've been invited to present or speak on something, it's likely because you're respected and people have a high regard for your opinion and your insights. Regardless, you should engage in research. You want to ensure that your facts are current, that your data is current, and that you're not making assumptions that on information that may have changed. The world moves quickly. When you prepare to write your first draft of your remarks, write with your audience expectations in mind. Think again, what you learned about the people to whom you'll be speaking. What are they needing, and what do they already know about the topic? One of the most important things you can do is demonstrate respect for your audience's intelligence and for their time. You also want to respect their names. Now, I'm saying this to you not only because I have a name with a Gaelic spelling that's mispronounced almost everywhere I go. I actually respect people who try and get the name right, whether or not they succeed. When you are standing in front of an audience or a group who has come to hear you speak, though, you want to make sure you have the right pronunciations, whether it is the individual's name, the organization, a city, a street. Do your research. Write out the phonetic pronunciations and then practice them. I say this because mispronunciations undermine credibility. Some of you may know that I spent well over 2 decades in higher education. And in higher education, convocation or graduation ceremonies are among the highlights of the year. And there is a ton of work involved. Now, you'll have graduated from high school, and many of you will have crossed a graduation or convocation stage for your own undergraduate or graduate education as well. I have been to more grad ceremonies than I can count, and I will tell you that the people in the organizations in the universities and colleges are heavily invested in the success of these days. They respect and hold in high regard the commitments that students have made to get their education, to learn, to earn their credentials. And these sacrifices include finances, time, and so on. And so everyone involved wants the day to be a huge success for their students. I have seen so many ceremonies go off without a hitch that it's impressive. I have seen one ceremony in which the provost, who had perfectly rattled off the names of at least 700 or 800 other graduates during the same week, because you have ceremonies over the course of a week and you can have thousands and thousands of students crossing the stage in a 5-day span. This provost made an unfortunate mistake in mispronouncing one young lady's name. And the student herself managed it with great grace. And the ceremony continued. No one said anything. But less than 2 days later, a letter to the editor appeared in the local paper. And this provost, who did an otherwise wonderful job of everything to do with the graduate ceremonies, was lambasted by, I think it was an uncle of the graduate. The uncle was reflecting on all the huge investments the student had made in order to earn her degree. The family had come from near and far to attend the graduation ceremony, and he was quite perturbed that after all this effort, the institution itself couldn't get his niece's name right. And that was a fair call. And if you go to another convocation ceremony sometime in the next while, you will likely notice that almost any institution now will have the graduand who's ready to cross the stage hand to a speaker a phonetic pronunciation of their name. It's done so that people are honored and respected. You want to make sure that you're demonstrating respect for your audience. And once you have the bones of your material, your remarks drafted, you know your audience, you know what they want of you, that's when your work really begins. And what I would suggest is you take that draft and you turn to a mirror, not in the office, but at home. And I would suggest you practice in front of a mirror. I say this not so that you be egotistical about how you look, but to suggest that if you want an audience to feel comfortable facing you, you need to be comfortable with knowing what your audience is facing, who they're listening to. I remember years ago, and I've written and spoken about this in terms of interview situations, working with a woman who was a very good employee. She was diligent, she was intelligent, she did her work well. She did not have anything other than temporary work in the organization because she did not interview well. She was highly uncomfortable. Just as many people are highly uncomfortable public speaking. So a couple of us spent some time with her to encourage her to try different approaches to interviews. And one thing I suggested to her was to go home each day, the week before this next interview was coming up, and spend some time in front of the mirror. She had already anticipated questions that would be asked in an interview, and she had already drafted out the type of answers with which she might respond. So she went home the first day after I suggested this. She had 3 teenagers in the house. She went home, locked herself in the bathroom, and began practicing in front of the mirror. Well, her kids didn't know what was going on with mom, because for about 15, 20 minutes, they would hear giggles, they would hear laughter, they would hear groans as she was frustrated with the way she practiced a response to some question. But she became comfortable with the notion of what she looked like, how she sounded, what she was saying. And she actually did get that job, the job for which she was interviewing. I think it was 10 days after this, but she landed the job. My point is, practice and build up your own comfort level with yourself before you're ready to take your presentation to other people. Pets are very accommodating audiences. But I do suggest that before you make a big presentation, you practice it in front of a person, someone who will be constructive and help you out with suggestions or feedback. Now, I find that when I first draft presentations, sometimes what I put in writing doesn't necessarily flow as eloquently or as effectively when it's spoken aloud. So when I'm practicing a presentation, I will record myself. And I don't read my presentations, but I'll have written them and had my ideas developed, formulated. And then I'll find, no, Sheila, that doesn't wash. It looked great on paper, on the screen, but no, not in front, not verbalized. So I'll go back to the drawing board. And that's what you'll do if you're working well to make a good presentation. You will go back to the drawing board and revise after you've self-critiqued or hopefully had a good contact give you a constructive critique. You will want to tell a story because while facts, figures, and information are important and they may be the thrust of the meeting, people often remember information when they can relate it or tie it to a story. You don't want to go overboard. You don't want to divulge personal information that's inappropriate. But if you can tuck in a connection that ties the information to the world or the worlds of your audience, that can help. Again, I spoke earlier about body language. Practice speaking with open body language, meaning you're engaged. It's signaling that you're engaged with the audience, that you're comfortable with them. Think of the best speakers you know. If you look at a platform or a crowd where there's a podium and a lectern for the speaker, sometimes speakers do remain behind the lectern because that's where the mic is, if they have a big group and they don't have the lavalier mic. But if you see a speaker step out from behind the podium, it's as though they're opening themselves up to you and they're being vulnerable. They're also doing that with confidence in most cases. Your body language, you want to be not fidgeting with your wardrobe or your hair or anything else. So plan your wardrobe, your grooming well ahead of time. They will not be a distraction the day of your event, and you will not be needing to fuzz and check if that jacket line was straight or not. Practice engaging people with eye contact. It goes a long way. Consider how you sound. Now we have the voices we're born with, but we can work on them. We can focus on our tone, pitch, the pace of what we're delivering, and you use those tools and strategies for emphasis and for effect. There is nothing wrong with the odd silence. It can be used to really good effect, and it gives people time to absorb an important message. If you're making a particularly important point, you may want to just have a count to 5 or a count to 10 in your mind before you continue. That lets your audience realize that this is of significance and it helps them absorb it. You want to speak clearly. Enunciation is important. Practice projecting your voice. Whether or not you have a soft voice, you can work on making yourself heard. And speak, please, with authority. It's only questions that should sound like questions. We've all done it where we've made a statement and let our voice trail upward so that a statement sounds like a question, and that diminishes your authority. It undermines it undermines your message. You do, as I mentioned, want to be vulnerable. You want to engage with your audience. Realize that it's a rare bird sitting in an audience who wants to watch a speaker fail. Most people want to see you succeed. They're not there to criticize you. So remember, you do not have to be perfect. Whether it's your first occasion public speaking, your 50th, your 100th, people are forgiving and they are generally good. Without oversharing or being too casual, let people then see that you are human and you're relatable. It's also helpful if you identify and eliminate, or at least work to reduce bad habits you may have. Now, one of mine is that I tend to think quickly, and so when I'm in a conversation with someone else, I may think they've finished speaking, and I need to remind myself, wait, are they done? When I'm giving a presentation or speaking in front of a group, I tend to talk quickly. I always have. So whenever I prepare remarks, I put a red note, slow down. That is demonstrating respect for the audience. You need to have them understand you. Conversely, you do not want to run long because that's disrespecting people's time. Some other challenges that people find they particularly want to work on are data overload. particularly if you're in a conference setting or a series of meetings all day long. People do not have a bottomless capacity to absorb detail. So remember that, treat them kindly. And if you are stuck, if you're trying to remember something you meant to say, it's very typical for people to insert fillers, such as the words, sorry. Those types of words are used either as fillers when people are nervous, or perhaps not sure what they meant to say next, or thrown by a question from the audience. Do all you can to minimize them. A couple of other tips: own your space. I mentioned people coming up from behind a podium. You do not have to do that, but what you want to do is be comfortable in your skin, comfortable knowing that these people are here to hear what you have to say, and that for the most part, people are pretty darn good. That's where that practicing in front of the mirror comes in handy. You know what you look like. You are who you are. Just go shine. Also, you want to take your topic seriously. You want to treat your audience with respect. That's a serious matter, but don't take yourself too seriously. Don't fuss. Don't worry. Just focus on your audience. And that takes us to proactive strategies you will use. You can be prepared to raise that hand with confidence as you say yes to presenting your views and sharing your knowledge. Or if you're not asked, find a way to put yourself forward in an appropriate manner. I would like to encourage you to train like an athlete. In fact, train like Mackenzie. Now, most of the pictures I've been showing you today, all the outdoor pictures I've been showing you here, are from a historic site in Canada at the opposite end of the country, Signal Hill, Newfoundland. But I couldn't let a presentation go by without showing you a little bit of beautiful BC, even if it's this rocky outcrop. I was here in Porto Cove near Whistler 4 or 5 years ago, and this young gal biked down, and at first I thought she was self-absorbed. She was taking a lot of selfies, but she's a pro athlete. She is an Iron woman. Her name is Mackenzie. She had done the Ironman competition Whistler the day before, and so what would you do after an Ironman, after running a marathon, swimming, after a long swim, running a marathon, and then a long bike ride? Of course, you would go biking for another couple of hours the next day. Mackenzie was taking photographs for her social media account and for her clients to showcase where she was traveling and let her sponsors know what she was doing. Now, when Mackenzie and I got to talking, I asked her how, when she explained what she was doing, I asked her how her race had gone. And with a smile, she said to me, "It was my worst Ironman ever." And I'm not kidding. She had a smile on her face. She hit some bumps. It did not ruin her life. It did not ruin her month. Yes, she would have loved to do better, but she just planned for her next PB or personal best. She was already talking about and looking forward to her next race and how she would do better. And you can see here from some of these samplings, these are just some of her championships and her placings. So that's how a champ thinks. She is not an Olympic champion, but she's a champ in my mind because her attitude was so positive. And when you invest in training, you can approach your public speaking in a very positive manner. Yes, it may or may not be the thing that you most enjoy in life, but if you invest time in training, if you climb those hills and do all the work, you will be ready. So the day before your event or the day of the event, preview the room in which you'll be presenting. Visualize yourself presenting. Walk up to the spot where you'll be or find the spot where you'd like to be and picture how the meeting or the presentation will unfold. Give yourself positive imagery. Test your hardware, your Wi-Fi, any connections. If you think something might be an issue, bring a spare. Do a run-through of your presentation. Now, you may not be able to do the run-through in the room, but you can do the run-through at home or in your office or in private. Get a good rest. You want to perform well. And then, before you take the floor, arrive early and get settled. I know for many assistants, that's a bit of a joke because if you're presenting in an office meeting, I know there will be people wanting your attention right up to the minute of a meeting often. Be proactive. Mark your time for yourself in your calendar. If not for yourself, do it in terms of respect for your audience and delivering the best possible job you can for your audience. When you and the audience are in the room together, make eye contact. Smile at them. Take a deep breath. Your audience doesn't need to see you taking that deep breath, but remember to breathe naturally. And focusing on the audience and its needs will minimize, I find, nerves and how do I look, how will I sound, because your energy is being directed toward doing your best for your audience. Check your body language, make that eye contact, and go ahead, share your knowledge, share your inspiration with confidence. You can be more confident because you have done your homework, you've worked on your skills, you've identified and incorporated strategies that work for you. You will make mistakes. You may trip, you may stumble, hopefully not walking up or from the stage, but you will recover from your mistakes. It's not as though you're going to be swallowed up into the sky, or you might want to drop down to the floor and out of sight. That's not unusual. But the thing is, mistakes are natural, they're human. And that's why you can create your own protection program. Here's a nice Newfoundlander dog. They're known for taking good care of people and sometimes, I think, sometimes rescuing. You can rescue yourself by planning ahead of time how you will react when you make mistakes. Because if you acknowledge that you're going to make mistakes, you'll be prepared. If you plan that you will carry on and move forward, you will avoid drawing attention to mistakes because your audience may be completely unaware of them unless you bring them up. Treat each mistake, each situation as a learning experience. We learn through that if we pay attention and engage in some honest self-reflection. Aim for improvement, your own new personal best or PB the next time around. The more public speaking you do, the more comfortable you will find it. Muhammad Ali, a wonderful athlete, hated every minute of his training, he said, but he also said he told himself, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life a champion. You don't need to become a champion public speaker, but if you work now, if you train on your public speaking, you'll improve your abilities. John Wayne, scared to death of horses, said, courage is being scared to death but saddling up anyway. If you're frightened or uncomfortable with public speaking, exercise your courage. When it comes to presentation time, you'll be bringing that presentation home into the harbor, as it were. So if you find that audience daunting, use your imagination. Make people less intimidating. Picture each person as a childhood version of themselves. Some people suggest this approach, but personally, I would rather not see any of you or my colleagues in your undergarments. You invest time and work so that your audience can sit down, settle in, and benefit from what you have practiced. You're ready to bring it in because you know your audience, you know what they're anticipating, you know your subject matter, you respect your audience's time, and you've practiced to make sure your timing is as close to bang on as possible. You've identified, worked on your own bad habits, because we do all have them. You've given thought to your body language and nonverbal cues, and you have worked on your voice projection and modulation. It's time. When you're on the stage, this is when you enjoy the fruits of your labor. Even if you're shaking inside, project a sense of assurance and confidence. That's all the more important if you're nervous. Now, remember, this is not Irish dancing. You can and you actually should use your hands. You'll want to acknowledge to yourself that you may be uncomfortable at times when you're doing public speaking. Accept that you will make those mistakes, but you have prepared. You'll have thought through how you'll deal with them. And the bottom line, remember that it's all about the audience, not about you. And then you can sit back and enjoy a sense of satisfaction that you have done the best you could. As you move outside your comfort zone, what was once unknown or frightening in the case of public speaking for some people can become your new normal. Now, you may not end up public speaking on a routine basis, but each time you put yourself forward, you're preparing yourself to perform that much better the subsequent time. So now we have wrapped up our time together. You are ready to begin. Whether you're focusing on refining your public speaking skills, you know you're good at it, but you want to become even better, or you want to work on a particular aspect of your delivery, keep that perspective focused on your audience. Do the work, do your due diligence in preparing your presentation. You have some proactive strategies you can use, and you're ready to present. I am really hoping that this has been helpful to you. And before we sign off for the day, I would like to invite you, let me know if this has been helpful for you. You have my website, which is exceptionalea.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all forms of social media. Let me know how this has worked for you. And I do hope that you find it helpful and that you approach public speaking with a good sense of confidence and that you have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.